My name is Frances Hasso. I'm a professor in GSF. And welcome and thank you for being here at the wrap-up panel, which is focused on the crisis in higher ed. And what I'll do is I would like to read a land acknowledgement, and then I will maybe I'll introduce all four of you first, and then I'll sit down and each person will give 9 to 10 minutes of remarks that they've prepared about the crisis in higher ed, and then we'll have Q&A that follows the routine, okay? So I'm very involved in various things in Durham, and I did want to mention something called the Earthseed Collective, which some of our friends are involved in, and I like their land acknowledgement. Earthseed exists on the land of the Ino, Tutelo, Saponi, Okanichi, and Shakori Native peoples. We respectfully acknowledge vibrant indigenous communities that call this land home and the painful impacts of genocide, forced removal, and attempted cultural erasure of the indigenous people here and beyond. As we learn to be in relationship with this land, we strive to honor all indigenous elders, past, present, and future, who have been and continue to be vital keepers of culture and wisdom. Land acknowledgements are about lifting the veils that have far too long kept us disconnected from the wisdom and medicine that is at the core of indigenous cultures across the globe. The acknowledgement of our earth as animate, not a thing that can be used, pillaged, and exploited for the benefit and entertainment of us humans, but a sacred, living, sentient being that provides for us all that we need and so much more. It is also about acknowledgement of all the interdependence of all species, not just humans, encouraging us to move beyond our human supremacist framework that is a precursor and byproduct of late-stage capitalism into a framework that acknowledges that humans are only one of an estimated 8.7 million species that call this planet home. Thank you. I borrowed Jen's phone because I left mine in the car. There you go. You can have it. Okay. So what I would like to do now is just thank Jen Nash, my colleague Jen Nash in GSF, and the faculty in GSF for all the work. I also would like to thank Kayla, Amanda, Sitlali, and the other people that have worked this particular event for all their labor. And also, by the way, I'm the vice president of the Duke AAUP chapter. So if you're at Duke, you should join the AAUP chapter. Okay, that's that. So I will start by introducing all four speakers, and then I'll take a seat and cede the floor to them. Our first speaker is Jillian Hernandez, is a PhD and a curator and scholar of contemporary visual art, popular culture, and style. Her book, Aesthetics of Excess, The Art and Politics of Black and Latina Embodiment, was published by Duke University Press, and she has recently contributed to the exhibition catalog for the culture, hip-hop and contemporary art in the 21st century, and also the anthology documenting the nameplate, jewelry, culture, and identity. She is an associate professor in the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at the University of Florida and the founder of Full Set Project, a collective that studies the cultural impact of nail culture. Sharon Holland, Sharon P. Holland, she, her, is the past president of the American Studies Association. She is also the Townsend Ludington Distinguished Professor in American Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She was chair of the Department of American Studies from 2020 to 2022. She is a graduate of Princeton and holds a PhD in English Language and Literature and African American Studies from U of M Ann Arbor. Yay, U of M. Professor Holland is the author of 3 monographs and 1 co-authored book. Her third monograph, Another, title Another, A Black Feminist Consideration of Animal Life from Duke University 2023, investigates the human-animal distinction Hume, Animal Relation, and the place of discourse on Blackness within these theoretical discussions. It was awarded an honorable mention from the John Hope Franklin Prize, page numbering, prize. Okay, it was from the John Hope Franklin Prize in American Studies in 2024. And there's also, you can read the introduction, it's open access. The third person on the panel is Durba Mitra, who is a feminist historian and theorist whose scholarship spans women's gender and sexuality studies and global intellectual history. She is the author of The Future That Was, A History of Third World Feminism Against Authoritarianism, which is, did it come out yet? Yeah, it came out. Yeah, I actually saw that. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's Princeton University Press 2026, which reveals how third world feminism transformed 20th century political thought. And also she is the author of the award-winning Indian Sex Life, Sexuality and the Colonial Origins of Modern Social Thought. Also Princeton, which focuses on sexuality and the modern social sciences. And last but not least is Dr. Samantha Pinto, who is the author of Inside the Body of Black Feminism, which is Duke Press 2026. Is that out? No, okay. Duke, what are you doing? No, just kidding. And so, sorry. No, maybe it's in November if publication. I'm being mean. And so, Infamous Bodies, which is Duke 2020, and Difficult Diasporas, NYU Press 2013. She co-edited the Rutledge Companion to Intersectionalities in 2022 and co-edits the book series Black Feminism on the Edge with Jennifer Nash, as well as many journal special issues with colleagues at large. And Samantha is currently a visiting professor of Africana Studies at Bryn Mawr College. Please join me in welcoming all of them.
Hello. Okay. Hi, everyone. And thanks again to Jen, Kayla, and all who made this possible. This moment of emergency has me thinking a lot about the stakes of our discourse on crisis. How do we articulate our precarity without posing our eventual demise? It is feminist theory, after all, that has taught us that words can make and remake reality. I loved the saying that Ann Chang offered earlier, I shed no tears until I see the coffin. I articulate a similar sentiment when people in so-called liberal states outside of Florida check in with me about how women's and gender studies are faring in my state. I want to say, like Bad Bunny did following Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, estamos bien. We're all good. Part of me wants to stubbornly refuse both the narrative and the reality. I understand the perils of doing so, but at my own institution, I'm witnessing a dynamic whereby our stated vulnerability is being weaponized to disempower us further. While I can't get into detail here, suffice it to say that the entreats by some of my colleagues for assurances of protection from the upper administration have only resulted in more policing of our department and in the seizing of decision-making processes where we should have control. These are colleagues who are distant from the forms of racial, gender, and sexual repression that faculty of color in the department know all too well. Some of us want to say, like Lauren Alamina does in Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, don't bother with them. We need to figure out how to save ourselves. But we are minoritized voices that are agitating. Meanwhile, our bodies are on the front lines every time we teach. Our shared governance is being encroached upon under the professed goal of protecting us from outside harassment. Not only is this a perverse exercise of power, but it also ignores the antagonisms already present inside the institution before the post-2020 anti-woke backlash. What if our biggest op is inside the department? The politics of administration and of how administration of gender and sexuality studies departments can be informed by our theorizing in this moment of ideological assault is critical. I believe that many of the challenges faced at my own institution stem from a lack of interest in consciousness raising, healthy debate, and productive conflict that could lead to concrete strategies. Right now, the only tactics employed have involved redaction and renaming in the hope of avoiding targeting. What to me is a losing and exhausting venture, a waste of time, a waste of labor. From my vantage point, there's a lack of guiding theoretical viewpoints from which to engage in relationship building with administrators, students, and stakeholders, even as we implore them all to rescue us. The challenges of the last several years have made me take stock of just how far academic feminism in some spaces is divorced from public spaces of intellectual production, cultural production, and of organizing work outside of it. I believe that the only way for the public to appreciate our work is for us to be engaged and in service to it. Right now, the outside political antagonisms are clear, but we also need to use the threat as an opportunity to do some self-study and think about what kind of academic formations we think deserve saving and how we can best embody them. And here I acknowledge that I've also had to do some reflecting on this as it relates to my own professional practice. We make space with our students in the classroom, but what it means to do interdisciplinary work on the vectors of gender, sexuality, and race in this moment means so much more. And we know this as we are all collectively re-traumatized by the desensitized coverage of the disappearance of Black girls, of Indigenous women, of the abuses meted out by men in high positions, right? Jeffrey Epstein, Cesar Chavez, right? R. Kelly, et cetera. Women, gender, sex, race, violence, and pleasure are all around us, and our students want tools for examining what is happening around them and how this moment was arrived at historically. They want to create new relations, ideas, ethics, and aesthetics to meet the moment, and they are. Students in Florida are moving through the university doing Black feminist theoretical work, trans of color studies scholarship, and formulating reproductive justice praxis. Indeed, as Stallings has noted, right in the rich dirt of the dirty South, all in the swamp that is in the bullseye of a monstrous regime invested in racism and cis heteropatriarchy. I want you to know that they're also trying to scare you away. I want you to know that we get to take breaks from the violence in the cool spring waters, like the ones that queer artist Shug McDaniel photographs. A few years ago, I published an article where I refer to Florida, my home, as a fugitive state. It is where Toyin Salaus or Neil Hurston, the City Girls, and Black feminist conceptual artists like Kenya Robinson are from. To write off Florida as perpetually tragic is a mistake. We are the bellwether, but also the site where imaginaries of freedom are forged. We are the place where Indigenous and Black communities absconded from the racial and settler colonial projects of Spanish, British, and US colonialism. And we must turn to these traditions now and notice how they continue. In projects like scholar Marvin Dunn's open-air seminars on Black Florida history, hosted for free under a tree at Florida International University's campus, my undergraduate alma mater. While several student groups like the College Republicans at UF and FIU have been found to be sending sickening racist chats, the students in our women's gender and sexuality studies classrooms are thinking through how to forge a future ripe with joy, beauty, and possibility for the most vulnerable. Estamos bien. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I spent the better part of the last month cooking for poets and sitting with their words. My offering today is poetry, of course. I want to thank Destiny and Gabby, Tyree, and yes, Ross Gay, but most of all, Metadula Jones, who helped with my pace and pause. And so this work is a collaborative thing. If I were going to say something or anything about this moment, it would be a filibuster that would last for all time. These times, where to begin? I want to start with some words from the great Gwendolyn Brooks in 1991 from the poem Speech to the Young. And I quote, say to them, say to the downkeepers, the sun slappers, the self-soldiers, the harmony hushers, even if you are not ready for day, it cannot always be night. You will be right, for that is the hard home run. Live not for battles won, live not for the end of the song. Live in the along. End poem. We indeed are living in the along, not a space of triumph or even song, but a battle fought and won through a praxis that sits and brookses along. What does that mean, practically speaking? That adverb I am consistently seeking. The model of change from within, terribly wanting. We take a place at the table and are shocked at our eventual haunting. Move was right, the true motherfuckers are showing their might. What to do in this interminable flight against the kind of power that edges out respite in daylight. We're given a lesson in Phenotop's bloody end. Is this the moment where blood finally meets kin? Just when you think you can't take enough, another hero falls off, a bluff. The fuck you say? What is happening to our settled sense? Why stand inside neoliberalism's tower, point out its hour, its 9 lives, its constant machination, its power? When we are called to the table of thought, we are taught. I'm trying to spill the tea, smash the saucer, upend that table. The spots at that oval have 2 feet, not 4. Only some of us know what a praxis is for. We are told you cannot have a negative ambition. We are told you cannot state what you want, housed in a contradiction. But the statement to not want what power has lives in the along, like those 80s kids in a Bronx underpass. Perhaps you find your answer in the political, I knew I was gonna mess that up. But that's not a praxis at all. The political is so narrow, it never includes that I or the sparrow. Yes, we can make a world that sits in the along, but for it to endure is the reason for my song. To last, to live longer in this along, we will need a few matchsticks and a praxis, subtle, simple, and strong. Ask ethical questions in the midst of it all. Will I be shot if I can't pay my bill? What kind of future will I inhabit at all? What kind of discourse calls out everyone who might fall from a purpose that finds power ubiquitous and earnest and maybe even virtuous, kind and ready to learn us? You might check the rhyme. It's so basic. Its praxis is weak, too easily taken in the face of something so craven. Maybe you haven't heard a word that I've said. You're just trying to find a place to lay down your critical version of a head. I like that one too. Living in the along, a Black feminist praxis, a financial instrument, it hollows out that thing we call taxes. What to do to create the thing that doesn't accrue, that has no basis in words like objective and justice or revenue. Our colleagues around the nation ask for our participation. Help us stave off the attacks on academic freedom, on syllabi. Help us prevent DEI's elimination. These requests fail off a mountain of evidence, among them that DEI was created for us, to bring to that precious table the colleagues you now see getting fired and downsized and silenced and possibly set free. Acronyms have meaning when fried or scrambled. Please try it. No, please do. Even Sam I Am might buy it. How to stave off the thing that you created. Now you want my help? Nah, I can't stand around while her story is obliterated, while history is rewritten in the guise of that sword-bending ruse, all for one and one for all. That is a fantasy, yes, but I already know you got no practice. This place has been dueling it off with each bit of power's access. Perhaps the moment is already here. It's staring us down, waiting for us to stand up, to show up, to appear. Aren't you tired of watching power do its thing, lulling us into the fact of its absence while flaunting its presence on each shiny thing? It's time to live in the along, in its wake. It's time to call out the bastard who make the table, who hone its edges, who sculpt the table seats and what it enables. A critique of power, the best hope yet, it comes with a praxis saying no when necessary, living in an along that is not simple or simply refusal, nor a backward-looking glance meant to house our desire, nor a forward-looking glass containing what's ours. That critique will never be a word on a page. It will be lived, and in the long where you set the stage. So, bore someone else with your interminable question. Seek not an answer that is critically appealing, that rounds out a battle cry that is hollow but not healing. When others fall and we gladly take their places, when the shadow of commerce nestles in those 401k spaces, know the question, what to do now, has already been asked and answered, and oh, how. Higher education is changing, that's facts. The folks in power, they want their institution back. I wish it were easy as a one-to-one exchange, but that would rewrite a history that hasn't changed much at all. We're still on that bottom, despite what Toni Morrison says. It's not burned and delicious at all. The rallying cry on the right is to stave off a riot, when the actual fact, we've been long quiet. Our numbers decreasing, the horizon is too. What's going on now is not a takeover, but to finish what they started in 1982. An illusion's illusion, a great national shame, is taken decades, it festers, but now certainly proven. A Black feminist praxis, how can I know that I have one? Except for the fact, whoa, that I am one. Flint, muscle, stone, and earth. What is that seed that we await at birth? So let's not be distracted by unethical questions. We know the landscape, we know its shape and contours. Our collective ancestors gave us an assignment. Put your hands in the soil, walk where they've been. Keep your eyes on the power, not, and note when that day comes that has already arrived. You just might have a Black feminist praxis to keep you alive as flint, muscle, stone, earth.
I'll make sure everyone can hear me. Thank you for that offering, Professor Holland. On anticipatory complicity. My name is Durba Mitra, and until the summer of this year, I am currently employed at Harvard University, where I'm faculty in studies of women, gender, and sexuality. Today, I want to address the question of the crisis or emergency in higher education, and really the crisis of thinking about studies of women, gender, and sexuality as foundational to a larger crisis in higher education. And I'm going to do so in three ways. First, what I describe as the anticipatory complicity of universities through the long-term starvation of programs like women, gender, and sexuality studies, and then now university compacts like that of Brown University or the University of Pennsylvania or the University of Virginia that have accepted biological determinism as university policy. Second, in the psychic terror of our moment, in the harassment, doxing, and mob threats to gender studies students and faculty, and the crisis of threats of deportation and the forced detention of international students and faculty, and their absence from our conference in person today. And third, the failure of our national organizations to even attempt to build coalition and do the intellectual work of combating those fascist ideas like gender ideology. So first, the call against gender ideology in universities is coming from inside the house. In 2025, in higher education, we have heard and used the phrase, the anticipatory compliance, about universities rapidly reworking everything from legal admissions policies related to affirmative action, to the racial and gender composition of faculty, staff, and students, to the very fields of research deemed valuable in fear of persecution from government and the loss of funding. In January 2025, the American Association of University Professors wrote an important report against anticipatory compliance in response to these actions. To anticipate is to take steps before, to prepare for the future. Compliance is to abide by laws, standards, or guidelines. But we are not in a system after 2025 that is creating rules lawfully in any way. Rather, I would submit that the feeling that captures the institutional mood of our moment is more accurately complicity, or as defined in the Oxford Languages Dictionary as, quote, the state of being involved with others in an illegal activity or wrongdoing. Perhaps nowhere is this clearer than the standing of WGS studies in the university right now. While claiming anti-institutional roots and a posture of critique and refusal, WGS as an institutional project has been under conditions of perpetual deprivation for years. From the feelings of fragility and exhaustion expressed by scholars in the field for decades, particularly in the last decade, to our moment now, an era of desperate, hushed preservation. This crouch, I believe that we are all sitting in a crouch, is especially clear at many elite private universities, where one might imagine that there is some financial support for fields that are vulnerable in state institutions, particularly like in the South. Unlike large public universities, and I'm the representative, I guess, today of a private university, the majority of Ivy League and the most affluent private universities, perhaps with the exception of Duke University, which has some independent resources, but those universities that have deep, deep endowments never departmentalized WGS nor expanded programs with any intent to invest in research. These elite private institutions entrenched underfunded curricular programs, institutes, while perpetually deferring commitments to scholarly inquiry. And over time and multiple waves of false claims to austerity, they have perpetually starved and quietly defunded these units, leaving only the shell of WGS programs intact. Many WGS faculty, and myself included, this is really a story of me, have participated in the undermining of our own curricular and intellectual goals, disregarding the insights that I teach of our field's critiques of the vexed histories of institutional power and our labor and exploitation at the neoliberal university. We have done the endless labor of the field, even as our programs experience systematic deprivation and disregard, long before 2025. Almost a decade at Harvard, I regularly heard senior colleagues in my field ask me, quote, or tell me really, we cannot take a public stand on our university culture of sexual harassment or sexual violence. You cannot take a stand on genocide in Gaza. You are a junior faculty. You should not say anything. You cannot address any issues until you are tenured. Then only you are free. Instead of taking any intellectual stand, we insisted on less than the bare minimum for grossly underfunded curricular programs, while affirming that we, and I am part of this, are the best citizens of the corporate university of all. I am a participant in this culture of quiet consent to starvation, and I am also a casualty of 2025's anticipatory complicity. In 2017, I was appointed as the first fully lined faculty ever to be hired into the program in studies of women, gender, and sexuality at Harvard, a program founded more than 40 years ago, and the first person ever to join the faculty at Harvard for expertise in the field of women, gender, and sexuality studies in over 390 years. My hire was perhaps too historic. I was denied tenure in June of 2025 by the president of the university, despite being told by people and my dean that I had among the strongest files that they had been reviewed in years. In June of 2025, just a few weeks after my denial, Harvard eliminated the longstanding Women's Center, the LGBTQ Student Office, the Multicultural Center, and equity programs, educational programs for first-generation students, as well as the formal DEI program in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. In the past months, under claims of financial austerity, they have gutted whatever threadbare budget and curriculum, I was the one-lined faculty, and there were some partial lines, that is left in WGS, but the shell is technically left intact. This starvation happened while I have been on the faculty in an environment where multiple faculty were found to have committed grave acts of sexual harassment and sexual violence. And almost every day, I supported students who faced unthinkable experiences of harassment, sexism, anti-queer and anti-trans statements, harassment, and acts of violence against students. I know firsthand of the countless investigations and definitive findings of sexual harassment by university leaders, including its former president, well-known senior faculty, heads of centers and institutes that were told to me in whispers, unsaid in public, and most of whom are still in secret and unnamed in public. Find me afterwards. We continue to learn of the many, many people at Harvard University who were the associates of Jeffrey Epstein before and after his 2008 conviction, including the president of the university, the dean of the arts and sciences, and multiple faculty who are regular experts condemning gender studies in the New York Times. In this environment of sexual violence, it is not surprising that administrators and faculty regularly characterized my work, the field, and scholars in WGS as lacking in scholarly merit and rigor. Second, the psychic terror of doing WGS. As a person working at Harvard, that special target of the right wing, particularly people like Christopher Rufo, I was doxxed and harassed for the past 2 years, more than 2 years now, for my scholarly lectures on everything from abortion to gender, to teaching courses on the history of gender and sexuality and colonialism. In response, I experienced firsthand the total abandonment of faculty like me and hundreds of others by my university administration that had, just a few moments before, championed my work and placed me in front of donors as a model of Harvard's diversity, particularly in front of growing Asian American donors. In response to direct rape threats in my email, in the physical mail, and social media threats that I should be deported from America, I was told to secure my emails with a 2-part verification program. The terror was everywhere. From November of 2003, my students, primarily women of color, international, queer, and trans students, faced doxing, the cruel taunting of trucks that circled our campus with their faces, personal addresses, and paralyzing threats to their home and families for sitting together in opposition to war, with absolutely no institutional protection from the university. Harvard's international students' visas were canceled, and we as faculty were left to deal with helping those students try to determine what to do to live. In spring of 2025, I, alongside others, sheltered international colleagues, including very dear friends, on valid visas and green cards, who spoke on the suffering of the people of Gaza, who, in fear of detention, after the illegal detention and forced incarceration of Mahmoud Khalil, moved secretly from house to city as they tried to maintain their employment. We, as collectives, secretly on Signal, confronted the cost of legal defense, the absence of any legal expertise for targeted scholars, particularly those targeted for gender and sexuality. In the months that followed, I witnessed firsthand, again, and again, the violent backlash against Black women, including Harvard's first Black woman president, Claudine Gay, as well as numerous women of color faculty, who had been publicly reviled and threatened with rape and racist violence without any consequence or protection from Harvard. And I'm just thinking now, after I was denied tenure, senior colleagues called me and asked me to help a Black woman who was being doxxed. And I remember thinking, oh, no one cares. While there are always and was always a deeply pervasive culture of anti-Black women and racist misogyny in the academy, as Tiffany King argues, today, there is no guise of any propriety shrouding the virulent racism around us, which is now totally speakable. Third, the failure of our professional organizations. In just the last year, I have heard from dozens of colleagues from across universities and colleges in the United States about the sudden and total decline of enrollments and majors in women, gender, and sexuality studies and allied fields like Black studies and ethnic studies that had actually for the last decade been active and often growing in enrollments despite the overall decline in the humanities. And there's a study from the American Academy of Arts and Sciences that details how over 77% of chairs of WGS departments until 2023 reported increased numbers in enrollments. Paradoxically, in this moment, as we heard today beautifully from Jane, Ward, and others, when popular ideas of gender defiance and nonconformity and the diversity of queer, non-binary, and trans life are more available than ever, students are running scared, afraid to openly engage feminist, queer, and trans studies in the time of Project 2025. Even as scholars and students are literally threatened with mob violence, and gender has become, as Robin Wiegman describes, a site of endless political attachments in the present, there has been little collective action in defense of research on women, gender, and sexuality. Frankly, I am appalled and horrified by the total absence of oppositional statements and any kind of strategic planning by our leading national academic professional organizations across the humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, to whom we give thousands of dollars in dues and fees every year. Here, I will call out the National Women's Studies Association, which, while a few weeks ago had a Zoom panel on the crisis of higher education, had very little programming in 2025, or a formal statement on the crisis of women and gender sexuality studies, and no statement. And I went and I tried to conduct a study to see which professional organizations made a statement against the executive order against gender ideology, and it was surprising to see basically none. The American Historical Association, I was looking at the professional organizations in the fields that I'm allied with, and it was surprising how silent, because we're all in the crouch of silence. These professional organizations have failed to do the work of intellectual life, which is their single mandate. No organization has created a formal working group or designated communications director to write op-eds, take out ads in the New York Times, for example, or produce online resources to explain that the real gender ideology in our present is the enforcement of binary gender by the US government. The only collectivization effort that I can name that I have seen sustained in the last year or so in the field of women, gender, and sexuality studies happened through the organization of gender, sexuality, and feminist studies scholar and director here at Duke, Jennifer Nash, who, ahead of Trump's second administration, created a network of chairs of departments and programs in women, gender, and sexuality studies. What is our work then now in WGS as universities wait in anticipation, ready to enforce new modes of state violence, like those who so willingly agree to do the imposition of gender binaries through the blatantly discriminatory government-university compacts? One cannot refuse the institution and its labor if you are not employed. Faculty across public and private universities today unsuccessfully invoke totally hollowed out institutional mechanisms of due process and faculty governance to advocate for the right to academic freedom, while contingent scholars of gender and sexuality in Texas, in Oklahoma, in Iowa, and elsewhere have zero protections from either job loss or the hounding of virulent mobs. We need to reckon with not only the shocking, rapid dismantling of our field of gender and sexuality studies in 2025 and the lack of substantial opposition within the university, but the decades of starvation of our fields by universities and colleges. We need to confront the failure of existing institutions and infrastructures that we built and fund to rise to this moment and build new structures and new institutions and networks that better address the emergency now. And even as I myself have lost my job in the field of women, gender, and sexuality, I believe more than ever in the importance and urgency of scholars and students in our field to fight like hell to reimagine it. Thank you.
Thank you for that and for all of my panelists' comments. Though I'm here under the guise of this term of visiting prof at Bryn Mawr, I am at the University of Texas at Austin. That's where my appointment is, and that's what I will be, where I will be speaking about today. First, I just wanted to thank Jen and Kayla and Lauren and Amanda and Mashana and all of the Duke GSF crew for today. To our, I know it's been amazing, to our amazing tech to the amazing tech here, to the food and food services, which has been amazing, and to Duke University Press, which also had their table out here the whole time, which I thought was amazing to be able to see books from so many people involved here and in the field, and how important that is. What I have to say in comparison very much brings us back to the very first moments, which is that beautiful video that the students made. And so when I speak, you'll be thinking of that, and in other ways it is talking about that. I've spent my career thinking critically about WGSFSs, so I'm doing that as my women's, gender, sexuality, and feminist studies, in a nod to also how Duke is organized. Institutionality. It is a field that held me as an undergrad. It was my first term in college, and I got into Intro to Women's and Gender Studies. Well, then it was just Intro to Women's Studies at Penn State University. I arrived as a film major. By mid-fall semester, I knew I wanted to be a professor of women's studies when I grew up. I changed my majors in my school, studying in the nascent WGST department at Rutgers University, my other state institution, divorced parents, right? Jersey, Philly. Public University WGST gave me a vision of a life, not with a static object of inquiry, but endless self-critique of the ground where I stood, a community always uneasy about institutionality and our place within it. I was also taught in that very first class, I wish I had a slideshow so I could show the cover of the book, and those undergrads of the 90s will recognize it. I was also taught in that very first class that women's studies was, quote, the academic arm of the women's movement, end quote. Defining its parameters outside of the institution it inhabits represents its historical formations, like ethnic studies, through narratives of insurgency, of a community belonging, an intellectual project that sits elsewhere from where it makes its institutional home. While I was coming up in the 90s academy, theory versus practice was still an ongoing central binary through which the WGS classroom operated and energized itself. At the same time, it was the tail end of the so-called difference wars, the tail end of the so-called difference wars and the heyday of the queer studies proper object era that led to the name debates of institutionalization, as well as the curriculum debates of the early aughts. And you can see Robin Weidman's work across the field and institutionalizing the field all over that description, as we do with this program as well. With FTW and with GSF at Duke. I'm setting the scene here for the primacy of debating women's studies institutional identity as an intellectual and material center of the field, one marked by critique, ambivalence, and even disavowal. Now, as institutional resources are being rolled back, departments are being demoted and destroyed, and course content and entire fields of intellectual history are being banned from the classroom. How can we, and are we, how are we looking back at the field's uneasy relationship to institutionality to understand and reckon with the current moment of crisis in WGS? I say we, but like my friend here, I also mean and feel I am at UT Austin, where we've consolidated a department, a WGS department, with my co-department, African and African diaspora studies, Black studies, as well as with Mexican American and Latino studies and American studies, that only achieved WGS departmental status 2 years ago, where my fellow in-state universities have outright banned, many of them have outright banned transgender studies, and my own has set parameters that make teaching the field impossible and illegal. I taught intro classes, intro to WGS, year after year as a core faculty member borrowed, as so much WGST labor is, that Jen referenced earlier, and was borrowed from faculty who volunteer where resources, including tenure lines, are scarce, starved, to use Durba's words, to non-existent. As I wait for my own professional dissolution as a scholar of feminist and Black studies, how am I supposed to feel about this unmooring and destruction of feminist thinking in its institutional forms? Something I'm supposed to be both ambivalent and critical of, and to support and build simultaneously, even as it augurs my own displacement and likely soon removal from my job and career. And here you could see so many echoes, for instance, of Erica Edwards' talk, where we talk about what happens about when we keep reproducing the thing that hurts us, right? And also, of course, of Anne Cheng's talk, which is also about doing that reproductive labor of the academy here today. So to use a 90s focused bad object, we're in the 90s, I'm in the 90s today, the bad object turned good in the WGS world, drag culture, we might think of WGSS as in institutional drag. So in those sort of old debates, we're past this now. Do we think of its mimicry of the form of institutionality as mockery, a pale imitation that capitulates to the norm? Or do we think of it as repetition with a difference, insurgently inhabiting the form to point out its normative modes as quotidian performance? And I used the present tense, but this is quickly becoming a past tense. What was WGSFS as an institutional form and object in the public university, as well as private, especially as it will continue to unevenly exist across US institutions? And how do those of us feminists in WGSFS's institutional wake think about the past, present, and futures of the field in multiple crises that are existential, both theoretically, a postmortem on what we did wrong, why we ever thought institutionality might last or protect in fits of cruel optimism, crowing about our virtue for either staying and building and fighting or never really believing in it anyway. And in crisis materially, existentially, and materially, as we seek new institutional homes or careers. We know it's not a versus. We know it's not a zero-sum game. But the shadow of bad objectness and its disavowal in WGSFS haunts here, and we can get into these grooves that feel seductive in their familiar poses, even as what's happening feels viscerally local and also unbelievable in its scale and the breadth of destruction, and I should say the speed of destruction at some places like mine that is a lab for the destruction. Public WGSFS has given me my professional life. As I fight for it to survive in a university system I lost faith in years ago as an exhausted feminist intellectual skeptic at heart, and continued to help build for years as a pathologically feminized subject whose reproductive labor, feminism, and the academy has relied on for me to be held by. And that I have given into that economy, again, as we've thought about across the board over this past 2 days. I hold both veins of the field in my hands during this crisis. I want to connect more to its modes of projection, its desires and fantasies about academic belonging and disbelonging, as I face that the future of the field won't be what I hoped for or abetted. I am looking for a new story to tell about what this era, my era of institutionalization, was, and why I and all of us invested or divested in it to be able to imagine otherwise in forms that the field has yet to inhabit. I'm not feeling it yet. Being in community here helps me and has helped me, and I imagine those of us in precarious positions, it has helped envision different genres for belonging in feminist theory, even as we fight to conserve what we can from this era.